Morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Anthony's Journey. So today we're going to be talking about, the events that transpired in 2023 of my current journey, and yeah, let's dive right in. So first, I want to briefly talk about a little bit about what happened last time. So, I was working, crazy hours back then, around 14 hours a day, working through Christmas, working through Thanksgiving, working through pretty much every holiday I could think of. And I thought that with all this hard work, that things were gonna pay off in the long run. I sacrificed time with my family, my friends, everyone, because what my belief was that will this all lead to a promotion or a big raise? So yeah, but for that, let's actually go into what happened. So it was 2023, and I was still doing that. I was still working my butt off, working until roughly till April. So I was working from November to April, making sure that everything was in a good place for our upcoming audit, making sure that everything was, on the up and up, everything was pretty much reconciled, everything was nice and neat for everything. So, everything was going smoothly. We were working through our audit for 2022, and yeah, overall everything was great. I was getting all the support. I was getting effectively everything was kind of falling into place overall. I wasn't having any complaints from my manager. My controller was fine too. But at the time, actually, funny enough, my controller, which was my big boss at the time, he actually was let go. Um, he was giving his 1 month notice, and then because at the time, funny enough, Electric AI wasn't really doing too well, to be honest. It was in a rough spot. We actually had roughly 3 layoffs around the time, around 2023, or at least leading up into 2023. So we had that. Some of our benefits were starting to be cut. So overall, Electric AI was not in a good position financially. So it was definitely a rough time for us all. So I would say, I'm glad that as I started to think about this, I was like, is this really the company I want to be with through 2023 and write it out, because it wasn't really looking too good. So yeah, definitely something that I started to think about as I entered 2023. So, but I went about my business. I was I kept working on the audit, kept working through my operational items, making sure everything was kind of going smooth. And then one thing that kind of piqued my interest is that actually one of my coworkers ended up leaving Electric AI. She was our FinOps engineer, and she was a great person. I really enjoyed working with her, and I kind of like lit something within me and said like, if she left, there must be something going on. Like there must be something kind of like triggering this downward impact. So I think what really like set me over the edge was that we actually had our performance review. And I was expecting like hopefully with all the amount of hard work that I have done, hopefully I would be able to actually get promoted to finally to be manager. So I was working as a senior accountant. I was a senior revenue accountant at the time, and I'd been a senior revenue accountant for a little over 3 years at that time. So I was just like kind of like just grinding, make sure everything was good. And, all my work was impeccable, luckily, and everything was great until I actually got to the performance review. And then my manager actually said, hey, like, you're doing a great job. You have a lot of great technical skills, but we sadly can't promote you because, because you're not managing anyone. To be a manager, you have to manage people. And at the time, I was like, so we have to manage people to be a manager, and I get it. So sometimes people manage people only, but that doesn't mean that a manager actually just manages people. Managers also manage operational functions, a function of a business. So I didn't really understand why I wasn't being promoted. It was definitely like heartbreaking because of all the amount of hard work that I put into trying to make myself, promotable. Including like taking steps towards, using like life coaching items. For example, I was actually taking life coaching courses myself throughout the time, to make sure that I was a good manager, talking through items that different scenarios of what a manager would be doing. And I was definitely going above and beyond, even sometimes even doing other people's work. Sometimes I would do work that wasn't even mine. Sometimes I would help people like my director of logistics to help him with his items. I would be helping like the expense team. I would be helping my own team. It was, yeah, it was effectively kind of just like overworking myself to death. For a company that didn't seem to value me, to be honest. So yeah, as I thought about it, I was like, wow, so maybe, this company isn't really right for me. Like I don't think electric AI is where my future needs to be. So what I immediately did after the performance review, they gave me I don't know, it was like a 3% increase while everyone else was getting promotions and big raises. So that kind of put a little bit more salt in my wound, to be honest. Like just seeing everyone else get promoted, getting pretty big raises sometimes on the upwards of like 6-figure raises, and I was like, wow, this is this is definitely like just making things a lot worse for me overall. So I think that's important to understand, like when you're in a position like this, to actually think about your situation and really realize that sometimes you could put your best effort in, and sometimes people don't really respect that. They'll just kind of just use that as fuel to promote their own career, which I know sounds terrible, but it is the sad truth of the world. Sometimes people will use you as a stepping stone to actually promote their own career. So it's important to understand when these situations happen, and when sometimes like just a company becomes a little too toxic, and just leave. Really, it's important to really acknowledge that sometimes when a company becomes a little too toxic, you just need to just head out and kind of just do what you need to do to do what's best for you. So I would say definitely, like, I'm glad that I didn't have to really like put up with it for too long. So I updated my resume, and then I kind of just like put it over into LinkedIn to see like kind of like what opportunities await for me out there.
Hello everyone, my name is Anthony and I'm the host of TheLostSanctuary. I hope you've been enjoying our content so far, and if you have, please feel free to like and subscribe. Also, we have our website up here, and we also have some socials down here, and as always, leave your comments down below.
So the first thing I did was I submitted my resume and on LinkedIn. And the other thing is that LinkedIn actually has a feature called Open to Work, but there's actually one specifically for like open to work but recruiters only. So that one is actually the one you sometimes it's good to use sometimes when you want to effectively kind of like look for new opportunities without like effectively kind of like going under the radar kind of thing. So it's important to really use this as a way to, as a tool to effectively transition to your next role while still being your role. Because the most important thing I would say is that sometimes having a role, it sounds really weird, but having a role already makes it easier to get another role in most cases. Especially, it gives you a lot of negotiating power because you already are making a certain salary. And then on top of that, it sometimes makes you seem more employable, which I know sounds terrible to say this, but effectively, yeah, having a job actually usually makes it easier for you to get another job in most cases. It sounds really terrible to say this, but like sometimes when you're unemployed, you have less negotiating power because you have no salary, you have a zero salary effectively, and essentially like people sometimes don't take you as seriously because you were let go or you were fired, and it sounds really terrible to say this, but this is the environment sometimes we live in, and this was even pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, it was the same thing. Usually, if you wanted to get a bump up either in position or salary, it was a lot easier to do that while you were employed. So, yeah, so I took advantage of that. I was employed, and I was like, okay, perfect. So, let me shoot my resume in there and get that out the way. The other thing that I was working on before I left Electric AI was that, hey, I already completed a year at Electric AI, at least as a full-time employee. So I decided to actually also apply for my CPA license. So, on top of like everything that I was doing, I was like, okay, so let me get I kind of had like a checklist. I was like, all right, so I'm going to get my CPA license. I'm going to, try to shoot for a manager position on my next role. And of course, try to see if I could get a kind of a bump up as well in salary if I could. So, yeah, these were the 3 checklists items that I wanted to do. So, the first thing I actually did was I did get my CPA. I got it in July of 2023 because I officially became a CPA after passing my exams, getting all those education credits, and then finally working under a CPA myself. So overall that met the requirements for me to actually get my CPA license. I got my certificate, and I was I was over the moon because it was like, yes, I got, now I officially can add that to my title, like CPA. So which basically just means certified public accountant. That's usually like, one of the best merits you can have as an accountant, just making sure you have a CPA, and of course maintaining it, of course, every year. So yeah, so I got my CPA. I was, that was the first thing I wanted on my checklist. The second thing was finding a job. So I actually, while I was working for Electric AI, I was actually interviewing for a few roles. And what's funny is that the market was in a really rough spot in 2023, and it still is right now. I'm not gonna lie. Even in the current day, it's still in a rough spot. So I was getting some manager roles, but not as. But most of the roles that I was getting was like accounting manager, but I wasn't looking for an accounting manager role. I was looking for a revenue accounting manager role. And the reason for that is because an accounting manager kind of does everything, like expenses, revenue, sales, everything. It's kind of like they have to pretty much be a jack of all trades. But I was looking for more of a revenue accounting manager role, which is what I was doing right now, which is basically more focused on the sales side and making sure that revenue or sales was in a good position versus like kind of figuring out like every kind of jumping through all the hoops of every single aspect of the business. So overall, I think I was very patient. I think it took a little over 3 months to actually find something, but in around September, funny enough, of 2023, I actually got a call from a company called and is an advertising company. They're ad tech, and yeah, it was very interesting because like the way they position themselves, that they effectively are the ones who kind of do the ads on like the streaming platforms, um, and like for example like Hulu, Disney Plus, all these kinds of things. So it was very interesting overall. Like it really touched different aspects of my own life because hey, I see I see ads all the time, so it would have been fun to see like how the ads are done. So I kind of accepted the role right away. It was for a revenue accounting manager role. So it was definitely a step up in position and also a step up in pay as well. So overall it met my other two checklist items. So yeah, I was on my way. I gave my 2 week notice here at Electric AI. But before I left, of course, I made sure that my company was in a good position. I made sure that, all the open projects that I had were pretty much completed. And yeah, so I made sure everything was in a good place before I left. And then the next thing was, when I got into the environment was so much more different now. It felt a lot more organized. People there were, it was funny because people there were very hardworking. Not that people at Electric were not hardworking. It's just like, I just felt like people had a different drive at overall. Like sometimes if you had to work those extra hours, they would. They would do it gladly. Like there were sometimes people who would work like around the clock, which I know it's not something that we should promote, but it was definitely refreshing to see like, hey, people when they need to, pull up their sleeves and do more work, they will. So I think that was important for me, especially when my first 3 months at I really like did my best to prepare myself. I kind of got myself established. I understood the business, and I started to really dive into like everything that I was doing in my last company, like billing, making sure that I was up in the collections, making sure that I was doing kind of every aspect that a revenue accounting manager should be doing. Especially since I was like, funny enough, I was a one-man team here too, but hey, that's the nature of the game. Like usually revenue accountants are like usually solo, especially at smaller companies, so that makes sense. So yeah, so overall, like I started my career and it was a great time. Like I had such an amazing time learning about how ad tech works, how advertisements work, how they're billed, how revenue is recognized for those, or sales are recognized, and how ads are run. It still is a great company, and I enjoy it very much. It's actually where I'm working right now, so it is something different, and the environment is not really like on top of you. So yeah, I think overall it's one of the best companies I've ever had. So I really enjoy working at Live, and I hope to be there for a long time, as I continue to develop and grow myself. Alrighty, so I think this will be it for Anthony's Journey, episode 16. I hope everyone out there has a blessed day, and adios.
Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing an amazing job, and I'm wishing everyone out there all the best. All right, until next time, adios.